Alright, today I'm reviewing Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which is a sequel to 2011's Puss in Boots, which itself was a spin-off from the overall Shrek franchise. This movie sees everyone's favorite swashbuckling cat grapple with his own mortality after using up 8 of his 9 lives, and that leads to this epic quest where he has to go and find the last wish, the titular thing in the movie, in order to wish for more lives and regain that confidence he had. All the meanwhile, he's reuniting with old friends and old enemies and making new friends. All while sparring with death himself. Right off the bat, let it be known, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is fantastic. Just utterly amazing. The animation is gorgeous. It's kind of a pastel color, kind of painted backgrounds. It reminds me of The Wizard of Oz. It is beautiful. It is gorgeous. It looks so good. It looks kind of like Spider-Verse, but more painted-esque. It's very suiting for the fairy tale fit. The runtime is tight. It has 1 hour and 42 minutes. That is fantastic. You know, so many more movies, they're becoming over 2 hours, venturing into 3 hours. It is nice to have an animated movie that you can just sit and watch. It's 1.5 hours, not including credits. Even when Disney is making animated movies and they're like reaching up to 2 hours, so many movies are being crushed under this weight of sequels and spin-offs and franchises and universes that it's nice to see this movie, just a singular movie, not have any of that fat and just be itself. By the time I thought to myself, this movie's pacing is starting to drag a bit for me, that was when the finale kicked in and then the movie ended. So that was fantastic. Superb pacing on the movie's part. I also have to give just so much love to the actual design of Puss in Boots. Maybe I took it for granted back in 2004 when I was, not yet born. More accurately, when I was old enough to remember watching Shrek 2, which came out in 2004. I don't think I was born when Shrek 2 came out. Or I'm as old as Shrek 2. I don't know. Point is, that design is fantastic. Puss in this movie looks so much like a cat combined with like human attributes. You can see the human emotions on his face, but he is still 100% cat. It is probably one of the best anthropomorphized designs of all time. It was beautiful to watch. I mean, there are so many times when I would watch his belly or watch the emotions flicker across his face. It was amazing. It was blowing my mind how well this cat was animated. Every facial detail is captured perfectly and yet still distinctly cat-like. It was amazing to watch. Also amazing to watch was the rest of the movie. It still has that Shrek humor, that sort of edgy Disney movie feel. And yeah, edgy. I guess Shrek is like the Snyderverse of Disney movies. It has that feeling, which I do appreciate. I've seen so many kids movies where I was like, this would be a lot funnier if that person died. There was a scene in Minions: The Rise of Gru, which I did watch, I regret it. But this random chicken got straight up eaten, and I was like, that was the funniest moment of the entire movie. But I knew in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, in another scene they're just gonna show that chicken survived, right? Can't be too gruesome. Shrek, DreamWorks, Puss in Boots, they allow it to be that gruesome. There's such a high body count in this movie. People will get green goblins and turn into skeletons here. It was actually kind of hilarious how violent it was. So it still has a trademark Shrek satire, but it also just has so many fun character interactions and so many fun, well-written, well-delivered lines that is where the majority of the humor came from for me. Watching Puss and Perrito kind of just bounce off of each other. I saw the trailer and I thought, that dog is gonna just so generic kids movie humor relief. No, Perrito was by far a highlight of the movie. He was also the crux of the movie, the emotional weight of the movie. A lot of that did land on Perrito, which you wouldn't think would work considering he was just introduced in this movie, but it works so well. It works so unbelievably well. There is a scene where Puss has a panic attack and Perrito just rests his head on his lap until he calms down, and that scene was fantastic. I have never seen a panic attack portrayed so well in a movie before. And from a kid's movie about a talking cat, I mean, maybe that's on me for kind of underselling the animated movie, but I'd rather undersell an animated movie and be like, that movie was so much better than I thought it would be and rave about it to everyone I know than have super high expectations and be like, could have been a lot better. Could have been so much better. Which is kind of how I feel for a lot of things. It's just you were so close, you twitch these angles. No, Puss in Boots, perfect movie. And it's absolutely hilarious. The first half of the movie is just it was hilarious to me. It starts off with a superb day in the life sequence where Puss is just out, he's doing his thing, he's singing, he's dancing, he's taking down this giant. That set a vibe. My intangible je ne sais quoi term, just the vibe of the world. It made me feel like I could live in this world where Puss is taking down all these giants. A large part of that had to do with the music. The music in that opening sequence was just amazing. He sings like his own theme song, Kronk style. I always appreciate those day in the life sequences where it's just like, oh yeah, this is a normal thing that I do on a normal day. I just take down giants. I love that. That's kind of DreamWorks specialty actually, when you think about like with Shrek and Megamind and Ants? How to Train Your Dragon. All of them start off with, this is what our life is like and this is how it's going to change. And I really appreciate that, just seeing how their life is like with these big opening sequences. However, once the plot kicked into gear, a lot of the humor in the movie did begin to die out, which I was kind of disappointed by. But on the other hand, it was replaced by like an emotional, this beating heart of the movie, which I do appreciate. Like on one hand, the first half was absolutely hilarious, and I would have loved if it was hilarious the entire time. But on the other end, I have seen what happens when emotional beats are drowned out by comedy and jokes, and it just makes the movie worse. So I do appreciate that they were able to hold back for those moments and just let those moments breathe. Because the emotional beats are what makes this movie work. It's what makes it feel lived in and alive, and not just like an overly corporate, oh, here's a sequel to that thing you liked that came out like 2 decades ago at this point. No, Puss in Boots feels like a movie that has a moral to tell, because like all good fairy tales, Puss in Boots very much does have a moral at the end. It's Aesop's Fables. It is a story about life and death and making the most of the time you have, because even if you don't know what happens after you die, you can still make the most of this life. Never stop fighting for it, and I just love that. It's also a story about trust and family and hubris and pride and all these other things wrapped up. And Puss, and how Puss changes throughout the entire course of the movie. It was so much more deep than I thought it would be. Maybe that's on me. I wasn't expecting so much. But then the reviews were really good, and I was like, well, I guess I'll see this. It looked pretty good from the trailers. And this movie starts and it blows me away. And by the time I'm like almost crying during some of it, that was, oh my goodness. Words cannot express how much I liked this movie. It's heartwarming and it's inspiring, and it makes you want to stand up in the theater and be like, yes, I'm gonna make the most of my life. And then drive back home and like make pizza rolls and cry in a corner like you end most nights. It's a classic through and through. Definitely better than Shrek. It could rival Shrek 2. I just love Shrek 2. That's probably one of my favorite finales of all time, if not the greatest finale ever made. But Puss in Boots just has such a strong emotional heart to it that I can't help but be compelled by it. It also, and I am so happy to say this, it has a villain. One of my biggest complaints about animated movies for years has been the lack of strong villains. You know, all of them. I think the last truly great villain we had in an animated movie was like Hans in Frozen, and before that probably like the Peacock and Kung Fu Panda 2. Those were probably the last 2 great animated movie villains. Because after that, it's been like last minute twist villain, you know, Zootopia and Big Hero 6, and it's been actually the villain. There was no villain like in Encanto, and sometimes there's just a last minute twist villain that reveals there was no villain like Moana. It is nice to have this Puss in Boots movie walk in and drop in the embodiment of death itself to chase down Puss and try to kill him. That was superb. And death in this movie was terrifying. I mean, the way the tone changed, the way the music changed, the way the entire atmosphere of the movie changed whenever death was on screen, that was superbly done. In that same way the animation allowed for a very fairy tale art style, this is like Brothers Grimm type of thing where death comes and he is coming for us all and death is gonna kill us, and it's very dark and scary even. I really appreciated how he was just an inescapable force of nature that you could not defeat, versus like being a sympathetic guy who just fell down on his luck and got like dumped into a vat of acid and turned evil. But this guy, just force of nature, straight up cannot destroy this guy. You cannot beat him. He is death himself. There's no winning this fight. I love that. And the fact that he's honorable. Like, at the end of the day, he's just a guy doing his job. He sees that his job has been done or that his job doesn't need to be done. He's just like, that's all I can do. Sorry, bro. If there's one thing I like, it's an honorable villain. All of it pitch perfect for a representation of death in a fairy tale kids movie. There is a YouTube compilation, like a little YouTube fan video of death that I'll link down below. I've been watching that like daily ever since the movie came out, just to remind me of how good death is in this movie. And death's not the only villain, because you also have Goldilocks and the three bears there in this movie, and they're kind of like the counter to Puss finding his own family. Goldilocks and the three bears, they are a family. So that's a nice little dichotomy there. And then there's also Big Jack Horner, who's like little Jack Horner, but now he's big and bad and voiced by John Mulaney, which is great. I love John Mulaney, but now he's like giving thumbs down to the pies. Thumbs down, that was more of a thumbs to the side, thumbs horizontal. But he's giving thumbs down to people and then they die in gruesome ways, which I thought was, again, hilarious. The edgy fairy tale, edgy Disney movie. But death. Death was so good in this movie. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, best animated movie since Spider-Verse in 2018. Probably the best DreamWorks movie since How to Train Your Dragon in 2010. It is just fantastic through and through. One thing, this isn't even about Puss in Boots. This is just going to be a really long tangent. But one thing that I'm going to find forever hilarious is that Puss in Boots is doing so well. It had like 2 trailers, neither of which I thought were like really impressive, but just such strong word of mouth, like online and in person, about how great Puss in Boots was. That is what got people to see this movie. And now it's made, last I checked, $390 million on a budget of $90 million, which is such an amazing box office return. It's all so deserved, but it's just so hilarious to me that Puss in Boots stands so tall in this year when Disney releases Lightyear and Strange World, 2 box office bombs from Disney and a Disney Plus movie that was okay. And then DreamWorks is out here releasing The Bad Guys, it's releasing The Last Wish, Netflix has the Pinocchio movie and Sea Beast. There's something to be said for liking to see a giant corporation fail. I see something else that's kind of like an underdog in my eyes just succeed to its wildest dreams. It's like, yes, I'm rooting for you. Give me Shrek 5 now, so that way I can be like, yes, Shrek is where it's at, DreamWorks is where it's at, Shrek Madagascar, The Prince of Egypt, this is peak animation. Puss in Boots was the hero 2022 needed to just save everyone. Some people were like, oh, it's Top Gun Maverick, that's a theatrical savior, Tom Cruise, praise be unto him, but no, it is Puss in Boots. If you have a free Saturday and you want to spend like an hour and a half at the movies, if you have kids, this is the movie to go see. I mean, even like Ant-Man comes out this week, go see Puss in Boots instead. This movie is so great. Just so great. And overall, I'm gonna give Puss in Boots: The Last Wish a 10 out of 10. Shockingly emotional, hilarious, and terrifying, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is a touching story about mortality and making the most of the time you have. So there you have it. Those were my thoughts on Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. What did you guys think of it? Did you like it? How did it compare to Shrek or Shrek 2 or heaven forbid Shrek 3 and Shrek Forever After? Drop a comment, subscribe, all those things, or don't. Honestly, I'm just making these videos for myself, and you guys are just here to witness the spectacle of me talking to my phone for an hour and then whittling down what isn't me screaming into a pillow into something that can be digested as a film review. So that's what this is.